Let's go. When I saw this chest of drawers, I immediately recognized the knobs that matched an old vanity I repurposed into nightstands a few months ago. A lot of its beautiful walnut veneer was loose or already missing, and the top was pretty banged up, but I already knew exactly how much potential it had, and I just couldn't resist bringing it home to fix it up and bring it back to life. To me, the style of this piece falls right in between the end of the Art Deco era and the beginning of mid-century modern. It doesn't have any maker's marks, and just like the vanity that I've already worked on, I couldn't find anything online, so I don't know its exact age. It is covered in gorgeous walnut veneer, and I absolutely love these chunky handles. I do have the missing one. It fell off in my trunk on the way home from the store, so they're going to get cleaned up and put right back where they belong. I really want to restore all of this to its original glory, so let's get to work. Love this little coin or jewelry cup in the top drawer. These are coming out so that I can get the knobs off, inspect for any damage or necessary repairs, and start cleaning. All of the tracks look okay, but there's a little bit of sawdust on this top drawer because these are wood on wood construction, but I think just rubbing a little bit of wax on there when I'm done should take care of that. I hadn't decided exactly how I was going to go about removing the old finish at this point, scraping, stripping, or sanding, so I decided to go ahead and give everything a quick wash with some degreaser to remove any old furniture polish residue or whatever other grime was on there. I always find that this cleaning time gives me a chance to get super up close and personal and gets my hands across every surface on the piece. And I do usually end up finding something that I hadn't seen initially, like the loose veneer on this drawer front. I grabbed my carbide scraper to start things off. This thing is a master at removing old finishes and is usually way faster than sanding. And since I already know that I'm working with a really thin layer of veneer on this piece, I want to do as little sanding as possible so that I don't remove too much of the wood surface and end up going right through it. The way that this finish just turned to powder was so satisfying. I think it's a shellac finish, but I got as much as I could off the top, vacuumed up all the mess, and then flipped the chest over onto a drop cloth so I didn't damage the wood on the other side on my rough garage floor, and took a look at what was going on, or maybe I should say coming off, on this base. Completely detached. Woohoo! Missing a big chunk there. I think I have that piece. It is. Okay, so we have that piece. This whole chunk here is gone too. I could fill it in and just paint the base. I could fill it in and try and camouflage it with some paint and markers. Oh, do I still have that walnut edge banding? Oh! Real wood walnut veneer edging. Cool. You hold that for a second. I kept scraping at the side panel, but because it had a little bit of a flex to it, it wasn't as effective as I wanted or needed it to be. So I decided to try some chemical stripper on here. I've had this eco-friendly, non-toxic finish remover from QCS for about a year now, tested it on at least a dozen different projects and not really had great results. I sprayed on a really liberal layer, and while that was sitting, doing its thing, I started gluing all of the loose veneer back onto the bottom with a syringe that I filled up with some wood glue. put a layer of painter's tape over the veneer to keep the glue from sticking to this board. That's going to help hold everything in place and give some nice even pressure while all of that dries. My first few swipes at this stripper were very exciting. It seemed like it had totally eaten through that finish and was scraping up really easily, but as I wiped the excess off, I realized that there was still a pretty decent layer on there, and we hadn't gotten down to the wood yet. I gave it a try over on the drawer fronts as well, and had about the same result. So after I'd cleaned everything off, I let things dry back out for a few hours, and then I moved on to sanding. I decided to stick some 220 grit sandpaper on my sander, which is a much finer grit than I usually use for strip sanding. It's more of a finishing grit, but again, this is a very thin layer of wood, and I don't want to accidentally remove too much of it and expose the substrate underneath. So all of this sanding is going to be slow and steady, very gentle, and I'm constantly checking to see that I'm not burning through anything. I scraped and sanded every surface I could while my glue repairs were drying and just kept sticking stuff down as I went. The next morning, I was ready to peel the tape off of my biggest glue down and start dealing with the giant missing chunk on the front. I peeled off what was loose and made a nice clean seam for myself. And then I plugged in my shop iron and opened up my edge banding. It's not already split nicely, it is. Okay. I cut a strip down to size and then just pressed it down with my dry iron for a few seconds to melt the glue on the back. I totally should have gone inside to the kitchen and grabbed a piece of parchment paper to keep the dirty iron off of the wood, but I ended up improvising with a rag instead, which worked fine, except it did stick in the melted glue a bit. Oh well.
Ooh. No bueno. No bueno.
Once I had that piece fit and stuck down, I cut a couple of more strips for the front and did the same thing. This stuff is super easy to use. I trimmed all the edges off flush with my box cutter and then used some 120 grit sandpaper just to blend the edges together and get rid of any little bits of glue that had squeezed out from under the wood. Really happy with this. It was a slightly different color, but I'm going to deal with that in a bit. For the rest of the smaller chips, I used that big piece that I'd taken off the front to cut out little replacement pieces, glued and clamped those down, and then mixed up some epoxy wood filler to fill in the tiny chips along the top edge. Once I had everything stripped and nicely sanded, I wiped each surface down with some mineral spirits on a rag to clean all of the dust out of the wood pores and give me a better look at what the sealed color of this wood was going to look like. I was satisfied with how everything was looking, so once the mineral spirits had dried, I threw on my respirator and grabbed a can of sanding sealer to seal up the wood. Remember how I said I needed to work on the color of this patch? Well, I almost sealed it up without doing that. Whoops. I went and grabbed a can of this stain in the color Fruit Wood, which is kind of a light pinky brown that'll bring some more of those red tones to this gray spot. It won't be a perfect match, but once it dries, it'll be much closer. Next, I needed to camouflage those wood filler spots. I just ordered this kit from Amazon, so I'd have it for situations like this. And I have to say, for the price of this, I think it was just under $30 Canadian or $20 American. I am really impressed with the amount of different colors that come in here. It's even got some wood putty and scrapers and little artist brushes too. I matched a few of the different colors to what was happening on the drawer and then made myself a little paint palette and went over each piece of this thing to blend in any small spots where the veneer was gone, like around the corners of these drawers, and then filled in my larger spots as well. This was so easy to work with too. I had to do a few layers to match the darker spots, but it dries super fast and is still really easy to blend. I think I'm going to get a lot of use out of this kit. I finished that off by just spraying a little more sealer over those touch-ups, and while that dried, I went inside to see what I could do with the crusty hardware. I plopped it all into a dish with some vinegar and boiling water, let it soak for a little bit, and then scrubbed it all down with some Barkeeper's Friend and superfine steel wool. I really wish these were brass that I could polish up, but they're just some cheap steel with a super thin plating over top, and most of that rubbed off with the dirt and corrosion that was on there. So I opted to bring the gold back with a bit of Rub and Buff metallic wax. Back outside and onto toner. This is a transparent finishing product with a little bit of pigment in it that is going to deepen the color of the wood and help me even out some of the lighter pieces with the darker stuff around it without hiding all of that beautiful grain detail. It's kind of an alternative to stain that just sits on top of the wood and sanding sealer. It's super stinky stuff though. Definitely a full ventilation, open all the doors and windows, wear your respirator situation. It can be a little tricky to use. You really only want a very light dusting over each surface because the color can build up really fast and get too dark and super splotchy on you. I've learned the hard way to always spray this going with the grain and spray way less than you think you need because things can get out of hand really fast. I went over each surface twice and made sure to leave a little more product over those lighter heartwood strips, not to make them disappear, but just to tone them down a touch. And then I left all that to dry. To add the protective layer back to this thing, I decided to keep with the Mohawk spray lacquer theme and grabbed this satin finish lacquer out of my supply cupboard. Other than being another really high VOC stinky product, spray lacquers like this are pretty easy to work with. They dry incredibly quickly and each layer you add melts into the previous one, so you don't need to sand in between unless you've got stuff stuck in it. This is a very thin viscosity product though, so it is easy to get drips or runs if you apply too much at a time. So again, really light layers, especially on vertical surfaces. I sprayed 2 coats, waiting an hour in between, and then used this buffing pad from Surf Prep to smooth out any little dust specks that had dried in there and get it nice and perfectly smooth before I added on my final coat. This lacquer is dry to the touch in about 15 minutes, but really needs to dry overnight to be hard enough to handle. I added some conditioner to the old bare wood on the inside of the drawers with this furniture salve and my wax brush to protect them from any new scuffs and just give them a nice, fully finished feel as well. I used a bit more on both sides of the drawer tracks to help these slide in and out a lot better too. Here's a reminder of what this chest of drawers looked like when I found it. And here is what this handsome gentleman is looking like now. I am so proud of this one. I'm still learning a ton from working on every single project that I share with you guys. And these kinds of veneer repairs and refinishing like this in general are still pretty new to me, but I am so impressed with how this little guy came together. I hope you had fun working through this one with me today. I'm going to leave a few more refinishing videos here for you to watch next if you want, and I will catch you all next time.